I've definitely struggled with this negative Nancy in my head, always telling me what she thinks about this, that, or the other.
We're not this isolated onion. And what is at the core of us? It's at the core of everyone, at the core of our universe.
The system of Reiki supports us in deepening our sense of belonging from the inside out. Welcome, friends, to the Reiki Women Podcast, an exploration into the profound depths of the system of Reiki from a Japanese spiritual perspective and how that relates to our modern lives.
We are keeping it real to Reiki's origins, challenging the New Age stereotype that things like crystals, chakras, and angels are authentic aspects of the system. I'm Bronwen Logan, and when I'm not writing best-selling books about the Japanese system of Reiki, 75,000 readers and counting, I'm here debunking outmoded Reiki myths and coaching individuals and groups through my website, Reiki with Bronwen.
And I'm Michaela Daystar, lead teacher and weaver of Heartscapes Reiki, connecting the dots between Reiki and environmental and social justice, because our individual healing cannot be extracted from healing relationship with the collective and with the land.
And I'm Carrie Varela from the Reiki Healing Society, here to help you transform your Reiki practice into a thriving, prosperous business. Because while passion fuels your purpose, it's time to make it sustainable, authentic, and beautifully you. We're three women diving into the heart of Japanese Reiki. We're building a community that centers women's voices and inspires well-being. We're not just for women, we're for everybody. Come join the conversation.
Hello and welcome back to Reiki Women Podcast. Today we're going to be looking at the subject of transforming your inner critic. It is possible, and we think that the system of Reiki could give us a hand with this. So today we're going to find out each of our experiences with that and thoughts on how you might be able to start making a difference in your life and changing the way you might think. What do you reckon, Carrie?
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I've definitely struggled with this negative Nancy in my head, always telling me what she thinks about this, that, or the other, whether it be how I look in a day, what I'm eating, certainly what I'm doing professionally, and tends to really give it to me in regards to the creative process that I'm in, whether it be creating a meditation or a video or an offering. She tends to really want to chime in, and it's something that can shut me down. And I don't know if any of you can relate to that, but another way she really shows up is when I reflect back on past things that I've done, and I almost immediately go into this kind of self-critical place. And it's painful. It's painful. It's really, really painful because our best friend would never think of us like that, would never, the people we love, the people we care about, our clients, the people who love our work would never think that about us. Yet it's something that, I don't know, I've definitely struggled with. So I recently offered this topic to my Reiki healing circle, and we spent a whole hour practicing on working to transform the inner critic. And I was really intentional about the languaging. So the transformation or the transforming the inner critic is not numbing it out. It's not dissociating from it. It's not ignoring it. It's not repressing it, but it is actually about deeply listening to it and trying to understand what the inner critic wants or needs. What I really kind of harvested from my own experience of really reflecting on this for that particular event and the process was that my inner critic is there and she's trying to protect me from being rejected. She's just really there telling me all these things. And it's, maybe you've heard this phrase before, like anxiety is experiencing failure in advance, and it's constantly assuming I'm going to fail before I even start. But we know through our own journey and experiences with the creative process that actually the process of doing is where we learn a lot. It's actually where we move beyond the creative into the manifestation, like actually bringing something to life. Yeah, that was the main thing that came to me, was just that this inner critic is trying to protect me from being rejected. So where, and then when I'm aware of that and I'm in my own sacred practice with that, I can work with my inner critic a little bit more. I can more directly see and face that fear, and get curious about why that matters, and who I'm afraid of, who I'm afraid that might reject me, and am I rejecting myself in that process too. So I think there's a lot that we can work with when our negative Nancy is getting really loud. I think a practice like Reiki, mindfulness, can help us transform, because Reiki is so, it's consciousness. It's consciousness of Ray, and it helps us shift our consciousness. And so I know that Reiki has really helped me with the negative dialogue in my head. Like, it almost shuts it off almost immediately, which is such a blessed relief when it's just going on like a microphone in your head. So I'd love to pass it on to you, Michaela. What do you think about transforming your inner critic?
Yeah, when you first suggested this topic, what jumped into my mind immediately is the soul collage card that I made for my inner critic many years ago. I think I've mentioned before, that's one of my other practices. It's a practice of intuitive collaging where you're making a small collage that represents different aspects of yourself. So each card is one aspect of yourself. And the very first card that I made, quite against my will, was my imposter syndrome, which was very active in my job at the time. I was working at the university and feeling very inadequate, having kind of been pushed into a leadership role really before I was ready. And because I didn't have good support and mentorship and I wasn't fully mature at that time, rather than seeking out the help that I needed to get up to speed in the job, I was really hiding my inadequacies, and I try to hide what I didn't know rather than seeking help. And I have compassion for that me and frustration because I, experience quite a lot of dissatisfaction and pain and suffering in that job as a result of just, I can't let them know I don't know everything. And so the inner critic soul collage card, I made around the same time. And of course, they're very well acquainted with each other, but they operate differently. And as you were sharing, Carrie, it occurred to me that there's a really strong connection between the inner critic, that aspect of ourself that is scrutinizing every choice that we make and every action that we take, and is, criticizing it, as you said, with the intention of keeping us safe from rejection, from, exposing ourselves as being not good enough. And why would that be dangerous, right? It's dangerous because it can put us in a position of not belonging. And just, before we started recording, Bron, when we were talking about that beautiful article that you just wrote around belonging and the way in which the system of Reiki supports us in deepening our sense of belonging from the inside out so that we can calm down those parts of ourself that are grasping for validation and acknowledgement and therefore belonging from other people, and really, beginning with that sense of inner belonging. And it occurred to me that our inner critic, part of the function of that part of ourself that can be so painful, as you said, Carrie, is to help facilitate belonging. Because if we go and do something we're not really good at, or that, isn't perfect, or that we have no business doing, or that other people aren't going to like, we might be rejected, right? We might not experience that fundamental human need of having safety and security and belonging in our group as a pack animal, as humans are. So just all of those connections were kind of swirling around as you were sharing, and I'm like imagining my inner critic card in my mind. And I think it's a really valuable place for us to put some of our practice. I love that you brought it to your practitioner circle, because it is an aspect of ourself that can really stifle us from growing into who we want to be and to really stretching our capacities and our abilities. And as you said, it can cause such persistent pain when we feel that sense of preemptive rejection, right? I mean, you were saying like that anxiety is like preemptive failure, like feeling the failure before it's happened. And this feels like also feeling the rejection before the rejection has happened. The inner critic is like ourselves rejecting that part, whatever it is that we're up to. And that is just a very painful experience. So I love that you brought that to your practitioner circle. And I can absolutely see the way in which just even the fundamental practice of Joshin Kokyu, being with the precepts, just starts to soften that part of ourself that is so heavily scrutinizing everything that we do. And to find that coming back to our center, coming back to our rooted place that is connected to the earth, that is resourced, that feels stable and secure and safe fundamentally from within, can help to soften that consistently over time, make more space for our own imperfection, more space for us to be a little bit diverse from the people around us, allow us to be a little different. Those things that the inner critic is going to try to squash and narrow down. But coming back to that place of fundamentally belonging to ourselves, belonging to the earth, belonging to the universe, belonging to Reiki, and then belonging to each other from that bedrock is, yeah, absolutely powerful medicine for working with the inner critic. So I love that you've brought those two together, both in your work and in this conversation. What comes up for you, Miss Bronwen?
There was a photo of me when I was about 4 years old. And I always loved this photo. I don't know what I've done with it. Anyway, when I look at it, I see this kid that is so full of life, so excited about things, so enthusiastic about everything. And then I think of people telling me, calm down, don't get so excited, don't be this, don't be that. Because I was thinking about where does this inner critic come from? Because I can't believe we're born with that as such, right? I don't know what we're born with. I don't have insight into that. But I would say that the majority of this stuff is stuff that comes from the outside in. And when we're young, we take these things on because we think that the adults or whoever it is knows better because we're told the adult knows better. We take these things on and they become these truths, these stories about ourselves. And then we have to go through this process of awareness where we start to question what those things are. Is it real? And who am I? So such big questions, but things that, especially for people who, like ourselves, and I'd say our listeners, we're people who are interested in finding out more about ourselves. So this is part of that process. And we often talk about the onion and this idea of the onion layers and us peeling away the layers, but the layers had to grow first. We are this little onion, and when we are growing all these layers on top of us, and then we get to a point where we start to see this onion and we think, well, is this me? Is this really me? What's at the core of my onion? And then we start to peel away, and then we start to question these different layers. And I think the system of Reiki is really beautiful for that. It gives us, Michaela, you named a whole bunch of things there. It gives us the benefits of the simple Reiki precepts. Carrie, you spoke about the past and our mind being in the past, but it's also obviously our mind being in the future, thinking, can we do that? Should we be able to do that? And then the voice from the past saying, oh no, you can't. And we have all these things going on. If we can just be here in this moment right now, like the precepts ask us. So for today only, just being here now and sitting together and just responding to the moment, then there is no inner critic. These layers, they are no longer in our way. I think the system of Reiki is great, namely for the precepts, but then giving us techniques like Hatsureiho, Joshin Kokyu, where we're breathing down into the belly and we're breathing out into our environment. And we're just understanding that we are simply a part of everything. We're not this isolated onion. And what is at the core of us? It's at the core of everyone, at the core of our universe. And we have that connectivity. The sense of that core is universal. And to touch that and know that allows us to know a deeper sense about ourselves. One more Reiki thing that I think is very helpful with this is if we look at the idea of Reiju, the Japanese initiation practice, which stems from this Buddhist practice called Goshimbo. And it means inner armor. And that idea of inner armor doesn't mean protection. And you spoke just before about protection, I think, Michaela. You don't need to protect yourself from the world if we have inner armor. We don't need that external thing. If we go inside and we have that internal armor, that is actually strength. And that is that core strength inside of us. If we can build that core strength, and we can with these practices like Hatsureiho, developing that strength inside of ourselves, that lived experience, that experience of that core sense of ourselves and how that is way beyond just us. We all have that. Then we start to feel that strength in numbers, I guess you could say, that strength of being a part of everything else. And there is a lot of strength that we can draw from that. And I believe that that is our inner armor. Carrie, what do you reckon?
I love that analogy, and I've never thought about it that way, Bronwen. That was really interesting. How I am always wanting to reveal the onion, but maybe not as mindful of these layers were built there over time too. The layers of an onion or the rings of a tree. It's this growth that we've had, and potentially the inner critic can be a reflection of experiences that we have, negative experiences in our childhood or otherwise, that really shape how we see the world, how we see ourselves. You mentioned the precepts, and that was the main kind of container of the practice is sitting with the precepts and this dialogue or conversation with one's inner self. And especially if we can, I think that sometimes the antidote to criticism might be compassion. Could be one of those things. Compassion, acceptance, willingness to be uncomfortable. And so the last Reiki precept, just for today, be compassionate to myself and others. And that's part of the transformation that can happen. So it's not pushing away, it's not repressing, it's not denying that this part of ourself lives or breathes inside of us, but really working with it. Because what I think the transformation is moving towards, well, let's actually back to the precepts, but then again, being true to your way and being, to gratitude, to not being worried or angry, like all of those things can directly impact our inner critic, right? And those might be kind of some of the weapons the inner critic uses, whether it be anger, fear, worry, a lack of gratitude for either the experience, the opportunity, oneself, and so forth. Being true to your way and being certainly can be an antidote to the inner critic. So, all of those things are true. And yet I think one of the worries with the inner critic is this true? Is this really true? Whatever dialogue is happening, is this really who I am? Is this, and I don't think that that's the case. I don't think that's true, but I think that we worry that it's true. And some part of the inner critic perhaps is maybe asking us to be more reflective of our motive, of why we're doing what we're doing. So in that sense, it actually, and the practice that I experienced of it was really merged into a dialogue with my true self, and it became a part of this integrity, like that I want to be able to listen to my sacred self, my true self, and be willing to listen to those uncomfortable truths, because maybe that's more wise than the way my ego or something else or a wounded part of me is leading me in a direction where it's really not going to help me. So yeah, that was the transformation that I experienced.
Yeah. That really makes me think about the way in which my inner critic and imposter syndrome were alive when I first started offering Reiki sessions. This not feeling confident yet, not even really entirely sure that Reiki was real or that there was anything even happening in a session, and feeling they're probably just lying. The inner critic voice would be like, this person's probably just lying there, not experiencing anything, being like, this is a waste of time. And and so and of course, even getting positive feedback, it took a while for that to pierce through that worry and that story that I'm not doing it right. I'm not good enough. It's not even a real thing. You shouldn't even be devoting your time to this. Blah, blah, blah. And the way that that influenced my behavior, because of course those kinds of voices are likely going to influence our behavior in ways that we don't necessarily like. But I took on this real sense of responsibility to give the people a lot of information. And so I've shared in the past that in my early couple of years doing Reiki sessions, I really wanted to give them a whole analysis. And we've discussed this dynamic that often people want to know what we've experienced or felt, or they want to have an analysis. They're used to doctor sessions or other types of medical or wellness assessments, or things like psychic readings or tarot, or all of these contexts where the practitioner gives you back information about what they've learned from their session. And I felt this real pressure to do that, to provide information based on my, I don't know, analysis or whatever of whatever happened in the session. And because I am not psychic and was having whatever hibiki experience I was having, but hadn't yet really come to the realization that I can't make meaning of that for another person. It may or may not have any meaning for that person. I was literally inventing meaning a lot of the time. I experienced this, or I saw this, and I felt this when I was at your knees, and that means this, and all of this analysis and meaning making and prescriptions that I was feeling obligated to give to the person. Not that they were necessarily asking for all of that, but because this inner critic voice and this imposter syndrome voice was like, well, you better give them something tangible because they're probably not experiencing anything in this Reiki whatever that you're doing. And that became really burdensome. But at a certain point, I had to really, God, what are you doing? Do you even believe what you're saying? How much can you rely on what you're actually analyzing here? And is it doing them any good at all? Is it providing them anything to get this information? And it was a real tension. It was painful to feel that obligation, but then doubt it at the same time. And, that really didn't end until I started working with Reiki from its origins and started working with Joshin Kokyu and working with these fundamental practices, really being in relationship with the precepts rather than just having them as a nice to-do list, a nice checklist of good things to do in your life on the wall, which was how they were basically presented to me originally. But really building a relationship with them that need to be seen as an expert and to have advice and good expertise that I can give to clients. And that if I don't have that, then I'm not actually providing them value, right? To really settle in to a spacious place where I can trust the value that is the Reiki session itself, which is the point. So yeah, I'm really grateful of that because it was becoming untenable. Like I don't know that if I would have stuck with it if I had continued to have this self-imposed pressure. Nobody was telling me I had to do that. It was purely this self-imposed pressure to provide more value than what I believed I was actually providing in the session itself. And I couldn't have lasted under that pressure. It just wasn't kind. It was just this unkindness to myself. And ultimately, it made me less effective. I'm very aware of that. I was less effective as a practitioner, being so distracted by my analysis and my whatever I was doing. So yeah, very grateful to, and at the time I wasn't thinking about it in terms of I have an inner critic voice that's oppressing me from my own brain. But looking back on it, that's very much one way that could be described. And it was absolutely part of that avoidance of rejection, that the inner critic that is the domain of the inner critic. So yeah, grateful to have let that go. And even today I had a client ask that question. So did you notice anything? Do you have any information for me after the session? And I just felt very calm and confident, saying, well, here's some of the hibiki that I experienced. I'm not going to make any meaning of that. If it is meaningful to you, here you go. But that's it. That's all I can tell you. I am
Yeah,
not psychic.
I do believe that it's all in the setup with those things. I really
Yeah.
do, that the person knows what you're going to do, how you are going to do this treatment. The transformation that you're talking about, Carrie, is subtle most of the time, subtle, and it's a whole life experience. People ask about what is my purpose in life. Well, I think it's to live this, to be aware, to learn about ourselves. I really think that is all our purposes in life, and to understand ourselves better and our place with others. And that idea of transformation is not necessarily a lightning bolt, but a moving through and growing, or I don't know what the opposite of growing is, but a decreasing of story and a deeper sense of who I am and how I exist in this world. And I think that's something that just goes on forever. And it's us getting insights. And I do think that the system of Reiki, through all the things that we've mentioned, really support us with that. So if you've made it this far in listening to our podcast today, you really must press the like button, ding, 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 notification, ding, 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 subscribe, ding, ding, ding. And we will be back next week with another Reiki topic. And thank you, Reiki Women, for being here. And we'll see you all next time.